Every CMO is going to come with a particular specialty. Marketing is very diverse, as you know, Gert. So you can have someone who's very strong at SEO. You might have someone strong at PPC campaigns. You might have someone, for me, more in the branding, awareness, and that sort of messaging side of it, right? So that's my strength. There's, you might have someone who's more into business development or team development. So you have to understand, okay, where are your biggest gaps? And they're going to help you identify this stuff anyway, but really consider, if what is our biggest problem right now, and then brainstorm some ideas on a list and go, okay, whoever we hire needs to be able to address these 1, 2, or 3 strategic things.
Welcome back to SEOleverage.com. This is episode 119, and I've got a really good friend here on the show that gets mentioned actually quite a few times lately on the episodes, Anfernee Chansamooth. Thanks for coming again.
Glad to be back, Gert. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing really, really well. We already had you on the show on episode 8. I just looked this up. I can't believe was so far ahead. I meant to have you back earlier, so we just need to schedule this in as that regular recording. I think you've got such a great experience. You're such a great guy. You have so much to share. We are in touch on LinkedIn very often. You're one of the best connectors of worlds and industries I've ever met. So I really appreciate that you grabbed some time for us, and we're going to talk about the CMO role today.
Yeah, it's a good place to pick up after episode 8, because obviously a lot has transpired within those year or so that we were last doing the pod together. And I have transitioned my role from done for you article writer, content writer, copywriter, into what we're calling now a fractional CMO service. And essentially, for those who are unfamiliar with the phrase, think of your virtual CMO or virtual chief marketing officer, right? Which is probably the more popular phrase. A fractional is just the new version of that, 2023.
Okay. Yeah. It's important to renew the terminology a little bit. It sounds like fancier, right?
Yes.
I really like this a lot, especially the fractional just indicates this is not a full-time CEO, right? And there's
Absolutely.
like one question I want to direct, and then I'll let you speak. Who
Yeah.
actually needs a full-time SEO, and who is going to have enough with a part-time or fractional CMO?
Great question. And it's really why I did the pivot into this world, because what I realized was fractional CMO is best suited for businesses that are, I would say, they're in that small to medium size. Typically, I like to consider them established. So they already have some sort of marketing system in place. They typically also have 1 or 2 human resources on the team, whether it's a dedicated marketing assistant or a VA, typically. And then they may be, if they're a larger team, they may actually have a marketing manager or a marketing coordinator in the team, right? Where it's not suitable are typically organizations that are large enough to hire in-house full-time, like a full-time marketing director or a full-time marketing lead, right? So if the organization and the company is large enough that they can say, well, we just want to have you in-house full-time and pay all the benefits and all those kind of things, then typically they won't need the services of a fractional.
Right. Absolutely. So small to medium size, somebody who probably has a few people already in the team that can actually execute. This brings me to a very important point. So what I hear all the time is we have a marketing person that's going to work with us as an agency. So very often we work with SEO consulting with that marketing person, or ideally a marketing team, where we actually line up the strategy or discuss the strategy with the CMO if they have one. But I have this feeling that many people think it's enough to have one person for marketing, and they might mistake the CMO role for that marketing person that's going to upload posts to their blog and create Facebook images on Canva and then report on KPIs and do all the things. What does a CMO actually do?
I'm glad you're raising the distinction here, Gert. So there's no like hard and fast rule on what the CMO does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So typically when we're talking about CMO, we're talking about a strategic thinker. So someone who's working with the CEO or the, you know, at the executive suite level. So we're talking about someone who's actually helping to paint the vision and drive the direction of the ship. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so whereas if you're thinking of just that, hey, this is a all-in-one general purpose marketing person that can do it all, everything from writing your content to putting it onto WordPress to doing your SEO, working with your agencies, you know, and also doing the strategy piece, that's rarely going to work out, right? Because what we typically find is you have the people who are who can execute and do that really well, and then you have people who've been more in the game longer and have more experience with actually working at a strategic level.
Yeah.
And that's actually how I got here, you know, within the 10 years now that I've been in the industry, is I would not have been prepared to be a CMO in my first 2 or 3 years of doing marketing, because I wasn't thinking at that level yet. I had to learn and develop the capability of looking at, you know, competitor analysis, looking at industry trends, looking at what's happening with technology, and having these, you know, types of conversations with my clients at the time. And then also the other thing that was obviously painfully clear in my situation was when I was just writing content for these clients, and they were small businesses. Typically didn't have a marketing person; they had just the founder, right?
Mm-hmm.
The CEO, and then they might have had other team members who were helping to deliver whatever service they had. Was that what we realized was, just putting content up there is not going to necessarily move the needle and bring us leads and bring us sales, right? We actually have to have some kind of strategic decision behind that, and have a, you know, and when I'm talking about strategy, what I'm really talking about is how are we going to win in our market, right? So you've got to have, it's like playing chess, and you've got, you know, all the other pieces on the board, and you and your CEO are thinking about how do we actually make the right move to win, right? I know that's a lot of work you do from an SEO perspective, and when you're consulting, you're doing a lot of this thinking as well with your clients, right? I'd imagine. So
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very similar to what we encounter here. So people very often come to me and say, "Yeah, we have a VA who has been doing SEO for a couple of years, and they handle all this SEO stuff, but they just see, okay, it's just not moving the needle. They do all the right things, clients tell me, but it's not moving the needle. And then we come in and say, hey, where do you actually want to go? But it's not enough to send this person to a conference or get them a course and now just plainly execute and focus on uploading content and ticking boxes on the Yoast plugin. Where do you actually want to go? And when we try to work backwards and say, okay, it's great that you have this person because we can work with this person and we can direct their efforts, because there are like 200 things you can do that are good for SEO, but only a fraction is going to be important in the next couple of weeks. And then every couple of weeks, we tell this person, now let's focus on this, let's focus on that. They execute. If they have experience with SEO, it's great. But they definitely, in most cases, don't have like a long-term focus where we say, okay, I want this client to be around with me in 2 years and 4 years and 12 years. We have some of those as well. Whereas, okay, we need to accompany them on the long run and actually make sure that they see they're getting closer to where they want to go. So we have a very similar situation here.
yeah, and I want to add to that. Like, really, the question that you asked was what's the function of the CMO, and there's actually a few things that the CMO is doing. One is I talked about being the strategic, you know, director. Like that's part of the role. Really think of it like as the head of marketing or director of marketing. Okay, that's so when I'm having these conversations with my clients, one of the key distinctions I make up front is I need, beyond you just deferring anything to do with marketing to me, I also need accountability and responsibility, and be measured on how we're actually moving the business, right? So there are actually hard results that I need to deliver in my role, right? Whereas if you had, for example, a consultant, right? So if you're working with a marketing consultant, they don't necessarily fit into your org structure. There's no reporting lines, right? Like it's literally you paying them for a bunch of time and some expertise, but they can disappear. They do a project with you or give you some advice and they're gone. right? They don't have team members reporting to them. There's no training that they need to deliver necessarily, right? But as a CMO, that's another function of the CMO is you're also a capability builder, right? So your role is also to help build capability in the team, right? And part of my some of the work I've been doing is actually helping hire the right marketing assistants, hire the right, when we're at a stage where I can leave the organization, I'm actually then helping to hire the person that comes into the business and that takes over what I've been doing, and then moves on from there, right? So there's that part of it. There's also the literally this morning before we got on this call together, I helped my client work through some business development stuff. So actually looking at how are we positioning the services that she's offering, and then how do we, she's got a very high sort of premium priced offering. She's in the scientific niche, if you will, or a scientific industry. And she showed me. I asked her, "What's your business model? Can I understand the business model?" So because for us to be effective at marketing and brand awareness, we really need to articulate, who do we serve? So we're going back to the basics here, but target audience, what's the service, what's the pain points, how do we deliver that? What's the delivery model, right? What's the methodology? Okay. And then, what happens, after the client works with you for 12 months or whatever the time period is, right? And then what I identified clearly is we have a gap, right? There's this in between putting up content and them paying you $60,000 to $100,000 a year for an engagement, right? There's nothing in between, right? So that for a lot of organizations, that's a long sales cycle that can take a lot of time. So what if we had something in the middle? And this is what I proposed to her today is, why don't we, and I said, do you do some kind of what do you call it, an analysis or a gap analysis or some kind of audit before they start the engagement? She said, yeah, that's part of the process already. And I said, well, why don't we pull that part out and actually make that the first step? And let's charge that at, how much would you charge for that? And she said, oh, that's about $2,000. I said, okay, well, that's the first step. Then let's make that's a much lower cost of investment, right? Like to pay you $2,000 to do an audit and tell us what's wrong and what you can fix. And then we give them the roadmap and say, okay, here's the roadmap. You can go and execute on that yourself, or you can hire us. And if you want to do that, let's talk about what that looks like, right? No different to an SEO audit or a website audit or a copywriting audit, right? Just now we're applying it to the scientific industry. But that's also part of the work as a CMO, right? So you would not expect your VA to be having that kind of conversation with the founder, right? Like that's not what you would expect that person to be doing.
Absolutely, and we see this a lot where I think the CEOs very often are taking on too much. They obviously have the vision, but they think they must be the person directing the marketing. They must be the person doing the product management. They must be doing this and that. And I say, hey, if I have the chance to work with a CMO who actually is specializing in this, I can actually probably move much faster and actually also be much more strategic. You raised an interesting point, Anfernee, and you talked about leaving as a CMO. So apparently there is like this idea that you're not a fractional CMO is not always around, but at some point
Right.
leave the project, or what's the idea behind this?
Yeah. So this is where I differentiate between sort of a project manager versus someone who may be taking on a CMO role. The engagement periods are typically longer. So a consultant might come in for a project that runs for a quarter, right? And it might be, we're going to execute SEO, set up your SEO and work with an agency. That might be the project, right? Typically with a CMO, at a minimum, I'm working with my clients 12 months at a minimum, right? And then up to 2 years. And then, and what I articulate to my clients is, by the end of that engagement, one of two things are going to happen. One is, we're working so well together and there's still more work to be done that requires my expertise, and we re-sign for another year or whatever time period is, right? So I'm embedded within their organization and their org structure, and I'm working with, because by this time I'm also training people and I'm building up that capability, right? The other thing that could happen is that we're doing so well that your revenue has multiplied because our marketing is working and our sales process and everything has been cleaned up and all those things. And therefore you're at a revenue point now that we can actually go and hire someone to replace me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's actually, for me, would be the ultimate win, because that means, between you and I get bored very quickly. So if I'm with an organization longer than 2 years, I'm struggling, right? But doing the same industry, blah, 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 blah. There is an exception, and you know all about the Bean Ninja story and how I've been with them for longer than 5 years. Typically, it allows the CMO to also bring in diversity of client, and also, I may choose to venture out into other industries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, industry independent, there are some nuances, but the process is pretty much the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so as I said, the ideal scenario for me would be, or any CMO would be, hey, we're not going to be here for the next 10 years, right? Like we work together 1 to 5 years, and then I'm out. But I want to equip your business and get you to the point where we can actually hire in a full-time person or whoever you need to step in. Right?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Because I think a lot of people have like this mindset to say, okay, when I bring on a CMO, I have this particular person forever, and they're going to be like directly integrated full time in the team. But just the idea that you come in, improve things, train the team, build capabilities, build this marketing team, that they can pretty much probably do this at some point on their own, or like with another CMO you bring in as a replacement, obviously makes like the entry into having a fractional CMO entry barrier definitely much lower. It's interesting, whenever we work with a CMO, it's much easier. So when we come in as an ACO agency, we always do an audit. It's just the first step. People very often ask us, what's a roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months? And I'm like, I have no idea until I audit the website, because then I know your competition, then I know your website in and out, then I know how your content creation process works, what's the potential, what's the gap, etc. So we always start with an audit. But it is true, when there is a CMO, we don't have to doubt who we are talking to, what the overall strategy is, where we are going, which kind of products we want to push more than others, etc. All those kinds of questions, very often when you talk to the marketing VA, so for example, that is focused on making sure we have a Facebook post every day, they obviously don't think about those things. So it's very interesting to talk with somebody who has been thinking strategically about the business and how marketing can actually help to move it forward. And it's just much more efficient. So I'm always happy when they say, hey, I put you in touch with my CMO, and I'm like, yes, it's going to be a great project.
And as you would know, growing your own business, all these years, we've been doing business long enough to know that you're not just thinking about marketing. That's only one part of your business, right? As the founder or the CEO, you're also thinking about, your HR, your sales systems. You're thinking about business development. You're thinking about tax. You're thinking about all these other things, accounting and bookkeeping, right? All these other things. And so the strategic marketing leadership that a CMO offers is the ability for the CEO to actually push that to someone else and go, hey, you own that, you think about that, 10 hours a week or whatever the engagement is. So I don't have to do that, right? Now, that's not to say that the CEO cannot have any input if they're really strong at marketing, because a lot of CMO, for them to get, to $1 million business, they're already good at marketing, right? It's just that's not their main core skill or their unique talent, and they want to focus elsewhere. I wanted to also add, another key benefit of the CMO function, right? We already talked about the flexibility in terms of time, in terms of how much they work with the organization or the company. It's also, you're getting strategic marketing leadership and expertise, without the full-time commitment. And also, because of that, you're not also having to pay the full-time wage, right? So cost is a big consideration for a lot of smaller businesses, as you know. But it's also one key component that I like to express to people thinking about, hiring a CMO, is that when you have a full-time salaried employee, oftentimes you find that you may have to try and make up work, because you know that you're paying them, for a certain number of hours per week, per year, per month, right? So you're kind of creating busy work just for the sake of, because I have this person and I got to utilize them. I can't remember what it's called. You might remember, Gert. It's how if we give someone 10 hours and say, okay, you've only got 10 hours to deliver the project, right? They're going to get creative. They're going to get innovative. They're going to make sure it happens in that 10 hours. When you expand the time and say, well, now you've got 40 hours a week to do it, right? It's a lot of it's fluff. A lot of it is let's, twiddle our thumbs and have meetings and let's do these other things that are just not necessary, right? So
Parkinson's law, right?
right, there you go, right?
Parkinson's law.
So CMO actually, and you just said that, CMO actually helps prioritize results and value, right, within a constraint, rather than just doing activity for the sake of activity because I'm just getting paid more money now because I'm just sitting there and I don't have to worry, right? And that's why my clients or clients of CMOs tend to find that projects are delivered faster when they're working with someone that's fractional, right, as opposed to someone that's full time.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, just thinking about our agency or my clients as well. I mean, there's hardly going to be a person that works with a remote team, which is like the most common scenario we work with, that would have enough work for a full-time CMO. But at the same time, I know that 9 out of 10 people manage their own lead generation, for example, where they say, hey, if they had a CMO whose main responsibility is to make sure that the marketing goes in a direction where it produces leads, there's like a huge weight off their shoulders and they could actually focus on some strategic work or partnerships or sales or whatever their role is, or build their sales department or whatever it is. But this marketing is like, it's like always present. You always kind of are there and in there, and you really have to see this actually also has a cost, right? If you do your own marketing and are responsible for your own marketing, you're not doing something else at the same time. So I think most business at a certain level, at six, 7 figures, have kind of an understanding how important marketing is. But very just giving this responsibility to someone else who's going to report on hard data, like you say, on what's going on and how we are moving ahead, is just taking a lot of responsibility off. I don't know if you can and want to share ranges of investment into a fractional SEO, just that people know, is this 100 or 10,000 or $100,000?
Yeah, so this is going to obviously depend on your region. So whether you're in Australia, US, UK, wherever you are, I'll give you the data from Australia. So that's where I primarily focus, in that market.
Right.
So to hire, just to give a median understanding of what it costs to hire a CMO, right, full time, it's $195,000 annually. Okay. At the low end, $146,000.
This is Australian, right?
Australian dollars, AUD, right? So I don't know what the US equivalent of that is, but right now, so you can imagine, right? When a CMO comes in, I imagine you can access that expertise. Now that's someone that's been in the industry for 5 to 10 years, as I mentioned.
Right.
If you can get someone with that expertise, but not have to pay that so what are we at? We're at anywhere from, I've seen starting from like $3,000 up to $10,000 per month. Just depends on their expertise, what they're bringing to the table, where they've worked before, what results they're also delivering, and the size of the business. So there are factors, but that gives you kind of a range to work with.
Awesome, perfect. Now I think this definitely makes a lot of sense. Also, obviously reasonable if you just think of what could you do as a CEO to compensate 3 to 5K a month at a certain level. Probably I get another client with the work with the time that you have available, get another client, and you don't have to worry about marketing anymore. Obviously, really, really compelling. I want to talk a little bit more about this CMO role, because I imagine there are obviously different stakeholders, right? I mean, we sometimes get dragged in even as an external SEO agency into the arguments between sales and the CEO and maybe even the founder and I don't know who else. How does it look for you as a fractional CMO?
Yeah, so this is a really something I get passionate about and fired up about because I've been thrown into the fire. I'll give it just an example of a client I worked with in the last quarter. So I was brought in as a CMO. I was announced to the organization. They already had a team of two marketing people, the CEO. I came in as a fractional. And the way I was announced was, hey, like Ant's role is to drive the marketing, and he's going to help prioritize what we should be allocating our time, energy, and spend on each month, each quarter, because that was their biggest challenge. They gave me a spreadsheet with 20 projects that they were running at the same time, and I just and then they said, our marketing people are burning out. And we're not getting results. And I said, okay, well, that's obvious. So then my first 2 weeks of working in that organization was really focused around let's focus on the top 3 projects for the quarter, okay, and which of these projects will actually drive acquisition, lead gen, sales, and awareness about the brand. Now then, as a result of my sort of discovery work, I had to go into sales meetings. I had to go into HR meetings. I had to go into other conversations, beyond the scope of marketing, right? And I had, and a lot of the work that I had to do with that particular client was actually expressing that marketing does not sit with just the marketing department, right? And you're nodding your head, right? Every touch point the customer or the client has with your business, right? I'm not just talking about digital, they're seeing ads online and they're seeing and all this stuff. I'm talking about from the time they hand you money, right? Or even just sending you an inquiry or seeing you doing a talk at a networking function or wherever it is, wherever this happens, or Gert sends you my way and says, hey, you should meet this person, right? All of those things are touch points, right? And so our role as an organization is to understand what those touch points are, okay, and then optimize each touch point to ensure that the expectation is met around what is our what is the experience that they have. And so now we're shifting from this idea of marketing versus sales versus customer support, and saying that entire thing is actually a customer experience unit, right? And it's also, they all contribute to revenue, right? Because if sales marketing does their job to attract, sales qualifies and closes the deal, but then everything falls apart at the delivery within the first 30 days or 90 days, right? Then we haven't done our job, right? And this is being mirrored. Anyone who's working in large organizations and Fortune 500 companies would have seen this trend happening in the last 5 to 10 years already, with their departments being renamed, and how those things are being they've been cutting like teams of 30 and 50 marketing and sales people and blending them into teams of 25 and going, you're doing all of it. Right? You have specialists within those teams, but we're kind of just mirroring that at the startup sort of small business level now with the CMO function.
Right. No, definitely important to ultimately nothing is moving if the main stakeholders are not supporting it, right? I mean, we just literally 2 days ago we had a meeting with the marketing, the CMO of a big company, and I was like, yeah, we can't crawl the website. So we have crawling tools that crawl the website, right? Where we pretend to be Google, do exactly the same thing as Google, scan the entire website, and we can't do this because their IT blocks us, right? And I'm like, yeah, could you please talk to the IT or establish contact so we can tell them that we need to crawl, and obviously also Google seems to have problems crawling, and it's like, ooh, this is going to be a tough conversation, right?
Yes.
So you see, obviously every department has their goals, their KPIs, their IT needs to comply with security audits, etc. So they shut everything down. Now marketing needs to be able to crawl the website. Now we need to enable this. Now we talk about whitelisting, IP addresses, and I don't know what. We can talk about everything, but you kind of see this barrier as soon as another department is needed. They kind of shrug and say, oh, can't we do this in another way? Because I want to avoid this kind of conversation, right? So having like one central figure that's kind of directing everything and making sure that this person understands why that person needs this. And this is also, I think it's also really good when this person is not a full-time member of the team, but an external consultant or CMO in this regard, where you say, hey, I'm not a part of this company politics where people might even be sitting in the same office or seeing each other every time. I'm external, but I'm kind of facilitating between them in order to make sure the entire company can move forward.
To add on to that point, being that you're an outsider coming in, you can actually quickly observe these things happening from a cultural perspective. Like you can see these are some political games going on. You can see these things happening. I would not say that, telling the director of HR to change the way they work falls under the scope of the CMO, right? But certainly where there are multiple sort of parts of the business that need to work together to execute on a result, those conversations do happen. Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's part of the work.
That makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you one final question before we wrap this up. Imagine somebody hears this, somebody says, hey, I'd really love to hand marketing over to Anfernee and really focus on the business. What kind of questions should they ask themselves, or what would be like first questions that you would ask them in order to make sure that the integration of you into their business runs smoothly?
Right. So I first of all, I'm actually putting together a kind of like a questionnaire type thing, because it's not just one question. There's literally 10 or 15 questions I need to ask you, and that's why we have the initial discovery conversation. But if you're considering a fractional CMO, you want to understand, does the expertise of the person you're considering to hire, do they have the industry expertise to work with you and your company, right? There's no point hiring a fractional. And I actually had to say no to a prospective client. They said, and if we want to hire you, we had a 2-hour conversation over Zoom. And by the end of it, I said, I'm not a fit. Like the project sounds amazing. The business sounds amazing. I could say yes and jump in there, but I'm not. I want to be frank and honest. I don't think I'm the best person to strategically and deliver on this and execute and make it work. So I had to say no because it wasn't a fit there, and I didn't want to fail the client, right? So yeah, is the industry a match? What's their specialty? Every CMO is going to come with a particular specialty. Marketing is very diverse, as you know, Gert. So you can have someone who's very strong at SEO. You might have someone strong at PPC campaigns. You might have someone, for me, more in the branding, awareness, and that sort of messaging side of it, right? So that's my strength. There's, you might have someone who's more into business development or team development. So you have to understand, okay, where are your biggest gaps? And they're going to help you identify this stuff anyway, but really consider, what is our biggest problem right now? And then brainstorm some ideas on a list and go, okay, whoever we hire needs to be able to address these 1, 2, or 3 strategic things, right? Because you're going to have a list of 10 things, right? But they won't be able to do more. And I've said, like, I come in and I say, if I'll be upfront, I'm not going to be your PPC expert, right? But what I can do is I know enough to hire and work with a PPC agency, and that's exactly what we did with that client, right? So I was in all the meetings. I vetted 3 potential agencies and said, based on what we've seen and what we're trying to shoot for, my recommendation is to go with this one, and that's the one we moved with. And now they're producing results for the client, right? So yeah, there's other, what's your budget? How much you're willing to invest into this. And also, when you're thinking about budget, it's not just how much are you paying the CMO, okay? It's also how much are you paying for the execution? Because if you're paying, let's say you're paying me $5,000 a month to be your CMO, but I'm not doing all execution. So we're going to need perhaps a content agency to work with, or we're going to need SEO leverage, to help us with some SEO stuff, or we're going to need, a Facebook ads agency to do something else. We're going to need specialists, graphic designer. We're going to need some these other bits and pieces. So we have to consider, what do you already have in the team? What capability is already there? And then what's other capability that we might need? And then how much budget do we have to allocate to that, right? Because that's, and I actually when I do my proposal, I give a game plan and I say, here's a rough estimate on what I think this is going to cost to execute the game plan, right? Beyond just what you're paying me, right, for my role. So and not all CMOs will do that, by the way. Like, that's just something that I think is important, and I've had clients ask about that. So a great question to ask is, how much is going to cost you, but also how much is going to cost to execute the plan.
To do whatever you say.
Yes, right. And also not just dollars, but time. Like, do I need to be in meetings as a CEO? Like, how, when do I get my marketing report? Like, how often are you reporting back to the business? When we have our strategic leadership meetings with all our directors, Are you in that meeting, right? Can you attend our quarterly meetups? If we're going to have a team retreat once a year and we're going to do strategy during that period, are you available to come along, right?
Yeah.
There are these considerations.
Makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate how openly you shared this on this episode. I imagine a lot of people want to reach out to you, want to know more how this actually works. Where can they find you?
Basically, the best place to go is to my website, which is authenticmarketer.com. If you want to learn about a CMO, just go to the services page and you'll see CMO there. I'm sure we can add it in the show notes. Yeah, it's definitely something worth considering if you are in that sort of five coming on a six-figure sort of range. What I'm seeing as sort of a common theme, Gert, is my clients usually have worked with agencies already and they've been burnt. And then they've realized, outsourcing it to an agency, like outsourcing marketing to an agency, will not guarantee success if the CEO does not have the understanding and the ability to actually drive the agency as well, right? Because there is keeping them accountable, right? Yeah. Sometimes founders don't even know how to have those conversations. And I'm sure, I think you interviewed Stevie recently. She would have talked about some of this.
I was going to mention Stevie Brown. We had on the show, and you kindly introduced us, and she could actually be a good candidate to execute then whatever you suggest.
Absolutely, yes, but she works in much larger organizations. She's looking at $500,000 plus, so we already know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, definitely appreciate the connection though. Yeah, thank you so much, Anfernee Chansamooth, theauthenticmarketer.com, talking about fractional CMO. Everybody who is a CEO and managing their marketing now, jump at this and reach out, at least have a good conversation. Anfernee is a great guy. We've been in touch for quite a while already, and I hope we have you back on the show maybe in 100 episodes again.
I'll be ready. Don't worry, I might
hopefully earlier. Thank you so much, Anf.
No worries, good. Appreciate it.
Everybody who wants to listen to this, head over to or read the written version of this, head over to seoleverage.com/podcast episode 119. Thank you so much.